Hi, welcome to today's Collaborative Solutions webinar, The Many Roads to Reporting, a panel discussion on improving government reporting. My name is Danielle White, and I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Transformation at Collaborative Solutions. On behalf of Collaborative, we're delighted that you're joining our webinar today as our speakers share best practices and how they've addressed challenges around government reporting. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping items. First, all participants are in listen-only mode and will be muted throughout the webinar. Second, if you have any questions, please submit them using the chat box, and we will have a short Q&A at the end of the presentation. Now I'd like to share a little bit about Collaborative Solutions. We are the longest tenured Workday deployment partner, but we're also a global finance, HR, and student transformation consultancy. It is our mission to help you get the best end-to-end experience from strategy and change management to deployment and post-production services. And we do this with over 775 customers in 125 countries with a 98% customer satisfaction rating. It is our goal to ensure that our customers are long-term partners with us so that they're able to adopt all the benefits of Workday as they grow. Now I'd like to introduce today's webinar speakers and valued collaborative consultants for our customers. First, we have Sherry Banks, a business systems manager at Buncombe County who brings over 22 years of experience in government reporting and 1.5 years of experience with Workday. Matt Evans is a financial planning analyst at Buncombe County. He's been with the county since 2015, working in the budget office until this July, where he made the switch to finance and has been using Workday since 2018. We have partnered with Buncombe County since 2017 on everything from their phase 1 full platform implementation to post-implementation services. Next up is Brenda Brumfield and Tassie Demps of the City of Rochester, New York. Brenda is the application services analyst, while Tassie Demps is the director of human resources management. And we've worked closely with the City of Rochester on optimizing their Workday tenant through delivery assurance and continuous value services. And lastly, we have City of Ontario, which has been live on Workday HCM and payroll since October 2016 and migrated from a very old and customized version of PeopleSoft. Reed Sigler manages the labor relations and employment administration divisions as the senior HR analyst and has 16 years of experience in government reporting and 4 years of experience with Workday. Tony McNaughton is a principal IT analyst at the City of Ontario and has been with the city for 13 years, was the Workday project manager, and still participates on Workday direction and support. Okay, let's take a look at the agenda. We'll start by discussing the complexity and challenges of government reporting, then move into best practices for government reporting and decision making. Lastly, we will open it up for any audience questions, so feel free to submit them throughout our panel discussion. And with that, let's get started. So we're going to start with who in your organization is creating your reports, and we're going to start with Buncombe County.
Hey everyone, this is Sherry. For us, we have both Workday support staff and our business staff. We decided to go this route because the business knows the data more than IT knows the data. We didn't want users to have to wait on IT to always create the reports for them. Honestly, now many of the business users are better report writers than we are, which I'm a little ashamed to say. We're currently conducting an internal report writer training class to train other staff in the business as well.
Excellent. How about Rochester?
In Rochester, the report requests come into me, and I assess the needs of the different folks submitting the request. Although we do have key members within the organization in different departments that also have access to build and modify reports as they know the data that they are looking for. Any complex report requests that we need additional support, we solicit our partner Collaborative Solutions to help develop those requests.
Excellent. In Ontario?
Hi, good morning. We have a really strong report writer in HR. He actually is sitting here with me right now in Reed Sigler. Outside of Reed, we've handled in IT most of the reports around benefits and payroll. We've struggled a little bit. We have most of the base reports that we need to do our business completed, but we still continue to try to build report writers and IT, and in the department ultimately would be the best solution. But like Rochester, we're using collaborative to help us get across some bridges that we need to get done on reporting in the meantime.
Great. How are organizations preparing for CAFR reporting? And we'll start again with Buncombe.
Hi everyone, this is Matt. So at Buncombe County, we're striving towards a goal of building as many exhibits from our CAFR out in Workday that we can. We have a joke around here that we would like to have a CAFR in 7 button clicks or less. Obviously that's not going to happen, but we can get pretty close by identifying what we need to go into the back end and do, and that would be like report writing. How do we set our reports up in Workday to yield something CAFR worthy? So currently the CAFR is a manual process. Workday holds the accounting transactional data. That is then dumped out into a model that we keep on the back end that converts what we need it to even include account numbers. And then our finance group loves this software called Caseware. So what they're doing is they're taking that transactional data, dumping it into the model, and then rolling it into Caseware, and that's how they're building the CAFR.
This is Tassie Dumps, HR Director from the City of Rochester. We are not utilizing Workday for the CAFR at the City of Rochester.
Okay, how about Ontario?
Like Rochester, we're not using Workday Finance at this currently, so we're doing the CAFR outside of Workday.
Okay. How do you handle external reporting through Workday? And start with Buncombe.
We utilize a data warehouse for some. We've also built a lot of integrations for a lot of the other ones. We also use RAS to get reports out of the system, which has been a total game changer for us. And Matt might want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we have a lot of, through public sessions and stuff, people are always asking about certain things. And one of the things that popped up recently was, how much money do you spend on libraries for each? So we have here at Buncombe County, we have 12 physical library branches, and then we have a couple branches within those. And something that's been popping up a lot is, how much do you spend on each branch? So we've been able to utilize Workday to create the report, enable it for RAS, which is reporting as a service, I believe, and then I'm able to feed that in through like a Power BI dashboard or some sort of consumable tool for folks to go out that aren't in Workday that can click around, and that data is always live. So that's one example.
Excellent. Rochester?
This is Brenda Brumfield, business analyst from the City of Rochester. We currently do the majority of our reporting externally through our integrations, where we extract data and transfer that data to our vendors or customers in benefits, payroll, and insurance data. I would say 90% of our data is transported through integrations, although we do some extraction of data via Excel and then load that onto customer sites via SFTP.
Okay. And Ontario?
So similar again to Rochester, we're sending reports to almost all of our outside partners via integration. Most of the reports that we have for those integrations, we're able to reuse though internally as the backup reporting for any of our transactions post payroll or post benefits, open enrollment changes, enrollments into our retirement system, which is CalPERS. And we send, on a regular payroll basis to the bank. We have the direct deposit and the pos pay file, earnings and retirement contributions go to our pension system again, which is CalPERS, and then just various third-party entities that we need to send information to. One of the main reports, and all of the payroll reports are very important, but we also do our demographics from Workday that goes to Kronos for us. We also use those same demographics to go to our benefits administrator. So we do have several reports that we use for integrations, but repurpose for other needs.
Thanks. How do you prepare for and address state level reporting requirements with Workday? And we'll start with Buncombe again.
So for us, we have built several, as I mentioned before, several custom integrations for most of the required state reporting. We also use ADP for all of our payroll-related reporting. So for that, we have an integration that actually feeds the data to ADP, and then they actually send the reports to state and feds for us.
In Rochester?
At the City of Rochester, with the implementation of Workday in April 2018, New York State also began implementation of a new retirement system. Therefore, we're not able to move to an electronic integration process at this time. So we're still doing reports through a manual system, Excel spreadsheets, and the sharing of that information in that manual way.
Okay. And Ontario?
So we were able to really sort of customize our configuration to meet the state's needs for reporting requirements. At that time, there was a big push with regards to transparency for public information. And so some of the reports that we deal with, so that, for example, there's a state controller report, there's a reporting that we do to Transparent California. That information, we were able to customize that information that's included in those reports. We are also providing to the state of California all of our new hire information through a DE-34 report. With California, we do have to take that information offline, put it into an Excel format, and then upload it to their websites. We also, though, have a legal requirement in the state for us to publicly share our salary step information, and Collaborative was very instrumental in helping us do that. It took us about 3 years to put that information together, and what we were lacking was a specific field that included the effective date of that salary range. And so we worked very closely with Collaborative to kind of build that report through Studio to mesh that data together.
Great, thank you. And how are you ensuring compatibility and reconciliation of third-party reports with Workday?
So like the CAPR at Buncombe County, the CAPR prep, this is a pretty manual process for us. For example, we do a lot of revenue reconciliations from various sources, whether it be our EMS billings or some public health things that we need to work on. We have some trusted general ledger reports that we've built in Workday that we utilize currently. We've discussed possibly leveraging worksheets for these reconciliations in departments that have approval chains or multiple employees, but at that point, I mean, we're really just swapping out Excel workbooks for Workday workbooks. So.
In the City of Rochester, this is Brenda Brumfield. We're doing reconciliation via our integrations, looking at the audit log and the statuses. We also do a compilation of manual with Excel spreadsheets and comparisons of the data, where we're looking at the business objects and targeting the issues and comparisons for reconciliation of the data.
Hi, this is Tony from the City of Ontario. We unfortunately are doing a lot of manual reconciliation with our third-party reports. Fortunately, in Workday, we could take a lot of information out to Excel to help us start to do some matching and comparing, but it is still a fairly manual process. We have an airport that we support, which is its own entity. And by FAA rules, we have to be very detailed in how we are charging back time to the airport. So that's one of our very manual processes to make sure that the employee time, the employee benefits are being properly billed back to the airport and not using FAA money in ways that we shouldn't at the city. We have grant management reports that our management analysts at PD and Fire and some other agencies that also are grant funded, they manually have to reconcile. many of those reports, but the data coming out of Workday for labor. And we also then have to manually do our CalPERS reconciliation, mostly on the enrollment side. We don't have an integration. We use CalPERS for our medical, and we also have our retirement through them, and both of those enrollments are manual, so we just have to also manually go back and do some reconciliation between the two systems.
Thanks. And how do you push back when there is a tendency to go back to the old ways of doing things?
So for Buncombe, I think we were pretty firm from the beginning. We've really not had a lot of pushback. Maybe a lot of change management throughout the whole process, I think, must probably helped out with that.
I agree. We were fortunate to have cross-organizational buy-in from kind of the genesis of this project. What this did was kind of plant that seed that change was coming. And of course, we still have some outliers, but that would exist regardless.
So at the City of Rochester, we were upgrading from a DOS-based payroll system that worked with COBOL that was 32 years old. So to kind of set the stage of how important change management needed to be introduced to this process. So that was one of the major things that we did to make the organization know that this was the direction that the organization was going, from this 32 archaic system that was really getting to a point where it wasn't going to even be able to support our needs much longer. So we introduced a process of change management that put change teams into each of the major departments that could also help continue to share how the process was going, what was coming next, the timeline associated with the implementation of the process. Another key important factor in the success of the implementation of Workday was that buy-in and that communication from senior management, from the mayor's office, that could resonate all through the organization. So the organization knew that the administration was on board with the project, knew that the timeline, there were communications sent out on a monthly, quarterly basis. And there were times when individuals in the organization, we got pushback and reasons why we don't want to change. But I think with having a change management team that was able to listen to what those concerns, communicate those concerns, and even communicate why they were no longer a concern, helps with continuing to have everyone engaged in the project and it being able to move forward and be successful.
So for us at the City of Ontario, much like Rochester, we went into the project with a change management team from the very beginning, and we laid out the goals of our project and what success looked like very early, so we always could go back to that. And I bring that up because one of the main goals that we had was to become less reliant on just a few programmers to maintain PeopleSoft for us, and have a system that the business owners could be more involved in the configuration and the management. And so that, from the IT standpoint, that was just one of our clear goals, and we can easily go back to that when we do hear, if people say it's not as easy as it was in PeopleSoft, and we can explain the decision was made, though, that we didn't want a customized system that was very expensive to maintain, and we weren't really in a position to upgrade. So that's really been our IT response to going back to the old ways. I'll let Reed talk a little bit about the other tools we use to.
Yeah, so we're now 3 years post go live. So I still think that there is somewhat of that tendency to go back a little bit, but I know that the Workday team continues to sort of be that voice of Workday as a solution, and Workday potentially has a solution for you, because we continue to find little pockets of resistance or pockets of where things are being done manually, where there might have been a misunderstanding or not an understanding of what Workday is capable of doing. So I think it's continued to be that voice of Workday as a solution for you, and I am finding that tide is turning where departments are now approaching us to say, we have problem X, can Workday help us resolve that issue? So I hear that, and again, it comes up on a regular basis, but you have to continue to be that voice of that Workday is a potential solution for some of these issues, where they do want to go back to that old method of tracking things through older systems or through Excel spreadsheets, because that's what they're used to.
Thanks, guys. I think that's a really great message that you're sharing with everyone on the webinar is the importance of change management, not just from a systems perspective, but from a reporting perspective, and that it's not a one-time event, but that it's an ongoing event. So I think that's a great message for us to be sharing. Next question, how are you conducting reporting needs analysis?
So for us, we have what we call our Workday Advisory Board. Up until recently, we also had a Workday reporting group that met. We've since, and just recently, like within the last month, have combined those. So our Workday Advisory Board comprises of many departments. We meet bi-weekly, and we go through any requests, any change request reports, new requests for reports, and we do a needs analysis as a group. And it goes on a smart sheet, and we vote on it to see if it's something we want to take forward or not. Once it's on the smart sheet, the Workday support team will work on it when it's in their queue, and that's how we handle it.
For the City of Rochester, report requests are handled on a case-by-case basis, but prior to implementing Workday, the old system reporting queue was reviewed, and it was analyzed on what reports were needed for future support. And those reports that were still needed to support the organization were migrated into Workday. So report requests that come in to me, and I assess what the needs are based upon the request. And I look at the database to see if there are current reports out there that are already written that can be transferred to the requester. And we also look into what type of data is being requested. Does the requester have security access? And then if it's a one-time frequency report, or is this something that we need to establish a frequency that the requester can also have access to? We are currently looking into implementing a process within Workday to submit report requests and then analyze those requests on a as-needed basis.
So with the City of Ontario, our approach is very similar to the City of Rochester's. Prior to our implementation, we did go through and analyze the current reports that we were using out of our old HRS system, worked with the various departments to determine what their ongoing and what their potential new needs may be, and then created those reports within Workday. Currently, as needs arise for HCM data, it's very sort of an ad hoc process. It's an email usually to me to say, hey, I need this information. Is this information within Workday? I'm trying to do a better job of sort of empowering my staff to know where the data is and know what the available reports are. So I've been working on dashboards and other various reports that will include, here's the information. So using tags and those type of things. So I'm asking them to look first before they put that request into me to see if they need new data. But once that's done, the report writers have the ability to kind of pull that data because they're the ones who are usually owning the information. So they're the ones who are putting those reports together and then making them available and determining the appropriate security for those reports.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about best practices for government reporting and decision making. And we're going to start with, what benefits has your organization realized as a result of real-time reporting?
So for Buncombe, I think it's always important to pull live data when at all possible, especially when there's someone at the top of the organization that is requesting the information. It's difficult, really difficult to manage staff, manage budgets, et cetera, if you're not looking at real-time data.
And I'll add, in the finance shop, so we're doing settlement runs very frequently, I believe even daily. So we need our reports to pull the latest data at any point so we can ensure that our transactions are available to review so we can answer questions as they pop up. And then, as I alluded to earlier, the county has several live, quote unquote, live dashboards that need to pull the latest data. And then the RAS functionality allows us to do that directly from the system.
So at the city, I would say with the implementation of Workday, it has allowed us to be able to have better real-time management over our workforce, our human capital, as well as to be better able to manage where there are opportunities and how to leverage those opportunities with the workforce. It's also allowed us to be able to put in and implement some programs that allow us to do workforce planning, because now we have real-time hands-on data about the workforce. We can associate that with payroll costs, overtime costs, and have the transparency between, it's allowed for transparency and planning between hiring for better hiring practices and workflow with benefits, payroll, and HR can all work together with the budget department. So I would say the biggest gain is just being able to see that data and not have to be wondering what are those numbers, or even working in a system that doesn't have the information readily available, or even wondering about the accuracy that was in a 32-year-old system.
Yeah, and at the City of Ontario, I would say that it's really sort of been revolutionary for us. Similar to the City of Rochester, there was always a question as to sort of the validity of the data. And we spent a lot of time forecasting information that would be potentially there in the system, or we were always sort of behind the curve with regards to our reporting needs. And when you're in something like labor negotiations, there's always that very critical need to have that information that's accurate and really upfront. But this whole idea of real-time reporting is becoming increasingly important for everybody, and I think everybody's sort of embracing it, from Workday HR reporting to payroll reporting to outside reports for payroll processing, and we continue to see this increased demand for this real-time reporting and how it can be used throughout our entire organization. And I think our employees have come to expect it as well, that immediate access to information and the ability to grab that data and make those changes and see those changes real time for them.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that you guys have seen such benefits with both, having that real-time access for reporting as a service and managing the workforce. And I think, those labor negotiations are definitely a critical component to it, and sounds like even some benefits across the employee experience as we look at this. So I'm glad to hear those benefits that you're realizing. How could you describe your organization's how your organization utilizes dashboards?
So for Buncombe, we've recently started creating dashboards, I would say in the last 6 months. We currently have, of course, employee and manager were our first ones to roll out, timekeeper, executive, finance director, financial planning and analysis, open checkbook, cost center manager, and program manager. We do plan on creating a couple of additional ones. So one for our county administration, for our county manager and her staff, and then we're thinking about also one for retirees so they can see everything when they first log in.
For the City of Rochester, we're not currently using dashboards, but we're looking to implement in the first quarter of next year. I believe this is the next evolution of having the real-time data in one central location for the user to be able to access all type of information. So we're very excited about moving into using dashboards.
And similarly, at the City of Ontario, we are really sort of trying to explore dashboards. I think purposefully when we went live, we're making certain that people understood sort of the interlinkages between different areas within the system. And so we were sort of encouraging them to use traditional means to access some reports. But we're now trying to bring all that information together to really streamline it so we have functional dashboards for each group. So I've been working on creating dashboards for the human resources team. We have a group of HR support individuals in our departments, and so creating a dashboard for them as well. And so they can have that access and we can kind of curate it. And I have a repository to when we create a new report or new information, we have a place to put it so folks don't have to go out and look for it.
So coming from dashboards, how could you describe your reporting governance practices?
Sorry, for us, as I mentioned earlier, we have our Workday Advisory Board. We're working towards enforcing a lot more reporting standards, such as report tags, naming conventions, report descriptions, etc. We're also rethinking our reporting governance and have moved the decision, as I mentioned earlier, back to our Workday Advisory Board. We have talked about there's probably a bigger need for a data and reporting governance outside of Workday. So we probably will establish like a data and governance committee at some point, but it'll be everything in the county, not just Workday data. But for now, we are using our Workday Advisory Board.
For the City of Rochester, I am the gatekeeper, but what we're currently engaged in now is a concentrated effort through our security project to look at user access and who can see what data and what data they have access to. So from that standpoint, we are looking at making sure that all those in the different departments and the different levels within the departments, making sure that they have data at their disposal, but yet making sure that they have data that they can view, that they have security to be able to do so. Report access is also audited on an annual basis, and we are also looking to eventually move into a data governance committee where we are reviewing access levels and information within the City of Rochester.
In Ontario, we're also still figuring out how we're going to do the governance. And like Buncombe, I believe we need a bigger project like data in general. We need a governance over all of the data, but starting with Workday is what we're going to try to do. And we definitely need to lay out some rules about who can create reports, who can approve reports, what kind of information we want to report. And most likely it will come out of our Workday team that still meets regularly. We'll have an individual kind of be the point person that when someone needs a report, she will help make sure that they're speccing it correctly and understand the need. And then the process will be in place for approvals for that report. Right now, we have a pretty tight ship just because there's not very many people who are creating reports. But as data just in general becomes more valuable and more important at the city, we're seeing a big change in our management team at the city about the ability to access data and use data for our various KPIs and other reporting matrices. So we want to just make sure that we have a really tight plan in place. And like I said, that'll probably grow into more of an overall reporting governance that we use across all systems and all data at the city.
Thanks. I think that's a great thing for, again, us to point out to our attendees on this webinar is that, we're frequently seeing more and more views of reporting governance not being limited to just Workday, but from an overarching enterprise data governance. So I think everybody's on the right track by looking at it from that perspective. How has Workday empowered your employees? So I know we heard a little bit about employee self-service earlier, but tell us a little bit more about how Workday's empowered your employees.
For us, like I mentioned, we did roll out self-service, which has definitely helped. We do encourage employees to use the system. When they call HR, I believe HR walks them through how to do it themselves versus doing it for them, which is how would do it in the old system. We have job aids available to all staff, to take them through all of the employee tasks. But like I said, we just encourage them to use the system when they can, instead of holding their hand. I guess we hold their hand instead of doing it for them like we have in the past.
At the City of Rochester, it really has allowed us to move from a system where employees had to come to HR or payroll, where there were one or two people able to give them the information about their personal information, to now our 3,600 employees, which includes everyone from laborers, professionals, public safety, and administrative staff, can now access this information themselves. As part of the implementation of Workday, we put kiosks in each of our 12 departments, so all 3,600 employees can access Workday within the workplace through a kiosk. They can also, in human resources, we have 3 kiosks that they can access, and they can also utilize their own personal computers from home or their cell phones to access their personal information. So they are now able to, in real time, access their compensation, their vacation and benefits, their pay slips. We moved to where we were about, I would say we were about 65% direct deposit. We are completely direct deposit now. All of our pay for our 3,600 employees is done through direct deposit, and they can access all that information. Now we do, with the implementation of Workday, we do benefits enrollment through electronic process incorporating Workday. So all of this allows them to enroll and be able to utilize a self-service versus getting email, or not email, getting postal mail that they would lose, and now they can just readily go into the system anytime they wish to and see their own information.
So at the City of Ontario, I think we've seen some fundamental culture change now that we're 3 years into it. And I really think it's helped us move away from a culture where we were always maybe 2 to 3 weeks behind on information. We had a culture where retros were just the norm, that, we didn't get the information from the employee or from the department. And so their compensation was delayed and other issues. Now that we've made data and transactions more accessible, and employees have access to their own data, I no longer have a line at the front door on Monday morning with the weekend police officers that maybe just work Friday, Saturday, Sunday shift there to do something transactional Monday morning with HR. So it's really sort of enable them to have that information. The other thing that we've seen is really employees have been able to help us a lot with their data integrity and our information. Another set of eyes to be the ones who are sort of reviewing, and we've really encouraged them to do that. Even when we went live, I had an employee who, we were dealing with data that was in some cases 30 years old, and I had an employee who had been around for 30 years, and her race information was inaccurate. I had to go back and kind of figure out where that happened, but that had happened 30 years prior. And just this week, I had an employee who noticed, he was a rehire, noticed that he had the wrong rate, and was providing us that information. So I think that's really helped us sort of improve our data integrity, and again, get out of that culture that we had previously where everything was just delayed by 2 to 3 weeks.
I would like to add something I thought of was giving employees access to be able to do everything on mobile. That's been really big for us.
I think it sounds like a great culture shift that everybody's been able to experience as a result of this, and that really having that employee ownership over their information has, I think from a culture perspective and hearing you talk, improving even your data perspective has really been fundamental for your organizations. Well, thank you all. We've had several questions come in, so let's go ahead and jump right into our Q&A. The first question is, and I think City of Rochester, you started to address this a little bit earlier, but what is your approach to security in Workday?
For the City of Rochester, just laying out exactly the platform of security and looking at the users and seeing who has access to what and what their role is. Looking also at the user groups from a functional level as well, and also making sure that the folks that have access to a certain level of data, what their role is, and should they have access to that type of information, as well as looking at user groups and what information they also have access to.
The other part of that we had to look at from a security standpoint is we're self-insured with our benefits, and they're coming from an archaic system where everything kind of fed through the IT department. With Workday, it has allowed us to put the security around those personnel and human resource activities, and be able to really identify from a security perspective who are those individuals within the organization who should really be able to see anything from benefits to labor relations information to payroll information. So the security project is really big for us to make sure, and also from a legal standpoint, you don't want to have any possibility of any legal issues because someone views some data or some information about another employee or has access to another employee information that they shouldn't have.
Does anyone else want to share about your approach to security in Workday?
Hi,
Similar?
This is Tony from the City of Ontario. Just to kind of add to what Rochester said about security, and we are also finding that we need to audit our security on a regular basis. We still have some roles being assigned to people in IT that we had as part of the project to help the departments with the administration of the different modules. And so we find that some of that is still lingering out there. And from an IT standpoint, we really try to limit our exposure to transactions and transactional data. Just, it's better not to have that access if we don't need it, because then there's never a question of staff improperly looking at data or seeing something that they shouldn't have access to. We do limit that access to senior level IT support that supports the departments, but still we try to limit that as much as we can, where IT might come in and help you with configuration, but we try to stay away from transactional work in the system. One other thing about security that we've had to spend a lot of time on, and it kind of, as we developed different reports, we realized that people who don't really have a role in the system needed a role to see certain data. So we had to make several custom user-based roles and also role-based security roles. For example, we have in each of our departments an HR liaison is what we call them. So we have roles for them and their departments, and the security works really cleanly on those where they have access to the people they need access to, and they have access to the data that they need access to. But we had at a higher level, we have management analysts in all of our departments, or all of our agencies, I should say. And we needed to build custom security for them, and also the custom intersection security, to where we were controlling what they could see, but also who they could see. The what they could see was important because a lot of the time we needed them to be able to see payroll results, but only specific payroll results that really had to do with payroll accounting, making sure that different charges back to grants or to departments was correct with our, salaries, OT, and fringe benefits. But also they have a different role in their department, or in their agency, again, I should say, to where they could be several management steps below the agency head or the director, but they needed to see all the way up to his position, his or her position, all the way down to the individual contributor. So that took us a while, but we finally got all that security straight, and it works pretty well. And we have that experience now. We know that model is available to us if we need to build out more security roles that are similar to that, to where really they don't have a role in the system as, basically a role-based security would usually help them, but they do need to see a lot of data in the system. But then again, just pieces of different domains. So custom domains, custom roles. We're pretty good at that now.
Excellent. Did
I'd
Buncombe
just like to add that this is Brenda from the City of Rochester. And don't be afraid to create custom roles, because sometimes when you have similar positions that are across different departments, but you only want to limit the access within that department, that's where the custom roles come into play and help you to narrow down the security on who can see what.
Excellent. Another question we had is, how often do you recommend refining your approach to security, and how do you do this? So for example, is there an annual audit? What's kind of the overall view of this? And I think, let's go ahead and start with City of Rochester on this.
For us, I think it would be somewhat, probably a larger audit would be, I would suggest annually, because you have so much movement with staff within the organization. You want to constantly be making sure that the appropriate people seeing information from a security standpoint is looking at that. I don't know, Brenda might want to also chime in. Schedule out whatever time you want to. I would say auditing probably needs to be on a 6-month basis, and that's going to be depicted by the movement within your organization of people moving in and out of positions. You have seasonal hires that are coming in and out, and also being able to maintain those folks that are coming and leaving, and looking at the access of the roles, the user groups, and looking to see who has what access to what type of data within the organization.
This is Tony at the City of Ontario. I'll just add that we use Okta in addition to Workday for access into the system. And we've also, anyone who has an advanced level of security or access to data, we also require that they do dual factor authentication. So we find that important just because we still have these lingering positions that might have access to data that they don't really need necessarily, but it's still in place in case they need to do something. So we just want to make sure anyone who has access to data, that their access to Workday is much more secure, to make sure that it's really them that's getting in to look at that data. But again, I think just in general at the City of Ontario, we probably need to put that review and audit of security on a more regular basis, because I think that we do sometimes give access, and this isn't just in Workday. For example, we have the same problem in Kronos, to where at one point someone, again, didn't really have a role in Kronos based on their job title, which gives them their user rights. So we would put them on an exception list, and we don't really go back as often as we should and check that exception list. And they're not coming off the exception list because, again, it was a manual entry to give them the access to data that they needed at the time. So we're trying to put that in place. We've already gone through one review of Workday, but it's very important, I think, just because when you have classifications like we have in government, that sometimes someone's working out of their classification and it's not necessarily an automated assignment. You have to go in there and make those adjustments, but then you have to also remember to take them away. So that's the recommendation, is probably at least annually. But like Rochester said, 6 months is probably even better.
This is Buncombe. I would just like to add, we really don't have a formal process yet, but we do have an internal audit department, and she has an audit dashboard and we've created several segregation of duties reports for her. So she is in there monitoring things from time to time, and she will get with us to make some changes, but for now it's not really formal.
Okay, thanks. Another question is, how have you determined who your stakeholders are in your reporting governance? Can we start with City of Ontario?
Sure. So again, we're still in the process, or need to start the process to have this formal governance over reporting. And again, that will be across all data and all products of the city, but starting with Workday. We'll start it with Workday. And I think we probably won't go to the highest level of stakeholders as far as, you know, there are certain people in the departments that can help us make decisions on, does this data really need to be shared with whoever's requesting the data? That's something that we really already have in place. That's a requirement, that if you want to have access to payroll results, even if it's just the payroll accounting information, there has to be a valid reason, and it has to be approved by the data owner. And for us, that would be our fiscal services director would make the approval to let someone see that data. In HR, it's pretty clean. Most of those requests go through Reed. He on behalf of the HR director will make that decision if someone needs to see that data. And then there's other people that are stakeholders that it's just assumed that they have approval to see certain data. For example, benefits sees a lot of payroll results, whereas most people in HR don't really have access to payroll results. The benefits team does, because they need to look at the deductions. They need to look at where people are possibly. We allow for cash outs twice a year. So that's a really hairy time for us, where we have to make sure that employees aren't going over the limits set by the IRS for their 457 contributions. So clearly benefits is a stakeholder in that process and in those numbers. So sometimes it's assumed, but we always try to go to the data owner to make sure that the data being shared is appropriate and approved by them.
So at the City of Rochester, we did not have a formal reporting governance team, but we had a project implementation team that was made up of key stakeholders with the implementation of that would be impacted by the implementation of Workday. And that consisted of stakeholders from the finance department, the budget department, IT, and HR. And what has happened with that team is still in place, still finalizing the steps with the implementation, because we also implemented Cronus after we implemented Workday. And through that, it was similar to Ontario, where each of those stakeholders, each of those individuals on the team were responsible to going back to their organization, looking at what are the reports needed in human resources, IT, and each of budget as well as finance. So while we still need to look at, as we'll move forward with this and finalize it, we'll have to we really will need to have a reporting governance committee, and I can see that would come from these key departments, would be built off these key departments, and possibly individuals from the administration.
So for Buncombe, ours is very similar to Tassie's. Ours was partially the team that was part of implementation, and then we just kept the team together, renamed it to the Workday Advisory Board. It does consist of representatives from finance, from HR and benefits, from budget, performance management, and IT. We wanted it to be a combined efforts from the main departments and the users of the system. We did not want Workday to feel like it was owned by one department. Our prior ERP system, it was always kind of felt like finance owned it, and we didn't want that. We wanted it to be a joint effort, so everybody got the same amount of buy-in, the same amount of votes at the table, for example. So we do have a lot of users in other departments. So we have our Health and Human Services Department and our Sheriff's Department. They each have their own HR and finance divisions within, and they have some really strong people and a lot of opinions. Maybe I shouldn't say that. We decided not to make them part of the team, but we do consult with them regularly, and then we take their requests or suggestions or complaints back to the team and handle it that way.
Okay, and one last quick question. How have you learned from government peers through anything like Workday Community or user groups or rugs or reference calls? If anybody has anything to share about how they've used the community or the ecosystem to help learn from each other, please do.
This is Matt at Buncombe County. So, community has been a godsend, I'll say, especially when I was trying to figure out how we were going to do the budget stuff. As a government user, we have fund accounting, and there's multi-year funds, and kind of really racking my brain, and which data source do I use? What's the best kind of report for this? Having a crush that was the budget, it was kind of the savior for me. It was community and other users like the folks on this phone call webinar.
And I'll agree. This is Sherry. I think community has been very helpful. The local user groups have also, we usually have one per quarter in our area, and if you haven't attended one, I highly recommend it. We learn a lot. You get to, just like at the Rising Conference, you get to make good contacts and network and bounce things off of each other. So very, very helpful.
For the City of Rochester, Workday Community, I find is definitely a much needed and encouraged asset. If you're looking for something, you can definitely find it there. Also, getting responses from other folks as they learn about questions that they have within the application. We also here utilize our local Workday user group as well that has been successful in sharing information and making contacts, and also providing information from their lessons learned with implementations with different functionality within Workday. So both are very, very valuable assets to utilize.
And this is Tony from Ontario. I'll just add quickly, I know we're at 11 o'clock, but we definitely take advantage of the people who have gone before us onto Workday, other government agencies that probably have already gone through some of the pains that we're facing. But we also go to the local user group meetings, which isn't necessarily government based, but they give you a lot of insight of ways that you might want to do things that are different and that you can make work for you, even though you are government. So I would suggest being involved both in your local user group and also the government user group.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we have approached the end of the hour, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If there were any other questions we didn't get a chance to answer, we will follow up with you shortly. And additionally, you'll be receiving a link to a recording of today's presentation in your email. Thanks, and hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.